Okay, so we all know plastic pollution is this just massive global crisis. But really, how do we actually solve it? The usual answer from policymakers is to slap a tax on it. But what happens when that doesn't actually work? Well, we're about to dive into this fascinating real-world experiment from South Africa. They tested 3 totally different ideas to get people to finally ditch the single-use plastic bag. And let me tell you, the results, they are not at all what you'd expect.
So first, let's just get a sense of the scale here. In South Africa, a staggering 56% of plastic waste is mismanaged. That's more than half. And it's a huge reason why its marine environment has become one of the most polluted on the entire planet. It's a serious problem, and the country's been trying to get a handle on it for years.
So way back in 2004, the government brought in this big national plastic bag tax. And yeah, it worked for a little while. But then people's habits just kind of crept right back in, and consumption went up again. The policy just wasn't cutting it in the long run. So this left everyone with this huge question. If a big top-down policy like a tax ultimately fails, what else is there? What can you do to change a habit that's just so deeply ingrained in our daily lives?
And this, right here, is where the story gets really interesting. Instead of just waiting around for the government to try something else, one of South Africa's largest retailers decided, you know what, let's tackle this ourselves. They essentially turned their own stores into a giant behavioral science lab.
So, back in 2019, they designed this incredible study. The plan was to test 3 totally different ideas right there at the checkout counters, all across the country. The goal was pretty simple. Figure out what actually works to get people to stop buying single-use plastic and start using reusable bags instead.
So what were these 3 big ideas? Well, first up, they tried a massive monetary giveaway. We're talking 300,000 free reusable bags given out to shoppers in a lottery. The second idea was totally different. It was a non-monetary approach called a nudge. And the third idea went back to money. They launched a brand new, super cheap reusable bag and then subsidized the price to make it even cheaper.
Okay, so you might be wondering, what exactly is a nudge? Well, it's not about forcing anyone to do something or bribing them with money. It's just a really subtle change that kind of guides people's behavior. In this experiment, it was something so simple. The cashiers just changed one little question. Instead of the usual, do you want a plastic bag, they started asking, do you have a reusable bag? That tiny switch in language, plus a few posters, that was the entire intervention.
All right, so you've got the 3 options on the table. A huge cash giveaway, a subtle tweak in language, and a new subsidized cheap bag. Before we get to the data, what's your gut feeling? Which one do you think actually convinced people to use fewer plastic bags?
Okay, moment of truth. Let's dive into the results, because this is where the whole story just takes a completely unexpected turn. The researchers crunched the sales data from 800 stores over 104 weeks to see what really went down.
Now, if you look at the chart on the left for reusable bags, at first glance, everything looks awesome. You see this huge spike in sales for all 3 experiments, looks like a total win, right? But then you look at the chart on the right, the one for plastic bag sales, and you realize the story is, well, it's a lot more complicated.
And here it is, the core finding broken down. The free giveaway? It reduced plastic bag sales by about 1.9%. Not bad. The nudge? That was the big winner, cutting sales by over 3.3%. But, and this is the really wild part, the subsidy actually led to an increase in plastic bag sales. A 1.1% increase. Yeah, you heard that right. People were buying the new reusable bags and then buying more plastic ones on top of that. It's crazy.
So the takeaway here is just so clear and powerful. The intervention that involved no money at all, that simple little behavioral nudge, was the most effective and by far the most cost-efficient tool they had for actually reducing plastic waste.
I mean, when you lay it all out like this, the conclusion is pretty stark. The money-based ideas were either just not cost-effective, like, think about it, giving away a 25 Rand bag to save just 1 Rand in plastic, or, in the case of the subsidy, they totally backfired. But the nudge? It was cheap, it was easy to implement, and it had the biggest positive impact of them all.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question, right? This seems completely backwards. Why on earth would making the good choice cheaper actually lead people to make more of the bad choice?
The researchers came up with a few pretty solid explanations. First, there's cost perception. Even at the discounted price, 1 new reusable bag still cost the same as 8 plastic ones, so it didn't really feel like a one-to-one replacement. Second, and this is so important, it all comes down to habit. People bought the new bags, sure, but they just plain forgot to bring them on their next trip to the store, so they ended up buying plastic bags anyway. And finally, the study ties into this bigger body of research that shows, subsidies often just aren't great tools for promoting environmental goals.
And you can see it right here in the author's own words. They basically say that financial rewards can sometimes be a lot less effective than we assume, especially when what we're really trying to do is get people to adopt new green products and, more importantly, green habits.
So what do we do with all this? What are the big lessons, the policy recommendations that come out of this incredibly detailed real-world experiment?
Well, the study gives us a pretty clear roadmap. First, focus on the nudges. Simple, low-cost behavioral changes can work better than expensive financial schemes. Second, you have to actively promote reuse. It's not enough to just get a reusable bag into someone's hands. You have to find ways to remind them to actually bring it back. And that helps build the kind of genuine environmental awareness that leads to real, lasting change.
And look, if you take away just one single thing from all this, let it be this right here. Using a plastic bag isn't really an economic decision, it's a habit. It's just baked into our daily routines. And this research proves that if you want to fix a problem that's rooted in habit, you need to use behavioral tools, not just financial ones.
It really gets you thinking, doesn't it? If just changing a single sentence a cashier says can have a measurable impact on pollution, what other small nudges could we design? In our communities, in our workplaces, even in our own homes. What other habits could we change for the better? What's the next default we should be challenging?